Welcome back to Grim Histories, where the past isn't just dusty, it's downright bloody. Tonight, we're diving headfirst into a story that's less medieval fairy tale and more modern-day feudal nightmare, forget knights and dragons. Our villains wear pinstripes, and their castles are built of steel and concrete. We're talking about the Pullman Strike of 1894, a bloody chapter in American history that reveals a chilling truth about the allure and the absolute terror of a perfectly controlled utopia. Imagine, if you will, a town built not by a king, but by a corporation. A town where every brick, every street lamp, every single dwelling is meticulously planned, owned, and controlled by a single, all-powerful entity. Sounds idyllic, right? A kind of corporate Shangri-La? Think again. Because in this seemingly perfect world, a brutal reality lurked just beneath the surface. A reality far more medieval than you might imagine. We're talking about Pullman, Illinois, a model town erected in the late 19th century by George Pullman, the industrialist behind the luxurious Pullman sleeping cars, the same ones that once graced the rails of America, transporting the wealthy and powerful in opulent comfort. Pullman, the man, envisioned a utopian community for his workers, a place free from the squalor and vice of Chicago's teeming slums, a place where his employees would live lives of order. But this wasn't a benevolent act of philanthropy. Oh no. This was a calculated move, a meticulously crafted system designed to maximize profit and minimize dissent. Pullman's town was a gilded cage, a meticulously constructed environment designed to ensure absolute control over his workforce. Every aspect of life within its carefully manicured borders was dictated by Pullman himself. He owned the homes, the stores, the churches, even the very streets his workers walked. Rent was exorbitant, wages were barely enough to survive, and any hint of rebellion was swiftly and brutally suppressed. Think of the medieval manorial system, where serfs were bound to the land and to their lord. Pullman's workers, though ostensibly free, were trapped within a similarly restrictive system. Their lives were not their own. Their loyalty, their very existence, was inextricably tied to the whims of their corporate overlord. They were, in effect, modern-day serfs, bound not to a feudal lord, but to a railway magnate. And this seemingly perfect system, this meticulously crafted utopia, was about to crack. The seeds of rebellion were already sown, simmering beneath the placid surface of this carefully constructed world. The year is 1894. The economy is in a downturn, and Pullman, ever the shrewd businessman, decides to cut wages. But he doesn't cut rents. He doesn't reduce the prices in his company stores. He maintains his grip on his workforce, squeezing them tighter and tighter. This seemingly small act, this seemingly logical business decision, would ignite a powder keg, triggering one of the most violent and pivotal labor strikes in American history. A strike that would expose the ugly truth behind Pullman's carefully constructed facade, revealing the brutal reality of corporate control, a reality that echoes the oppressive systems of the medieval era, a reality that will leave you questioning the very nature of utopia itself. Welcome back, Grim Histories enthusiasts. Last time, we were left reeling from the sheer audacity of a corporate town that ended in bloodshed. But to understand the violence, we need to delve into the mind of its creator, George Pullman, a man whose vision of utopia eerily mirrored the rigid hierarchies of a medieval fiefdom. Forget the benevolent industrialist myth. Pullman wasn't building a community. He was constructing a meticulously controlled ecosystem, a gilded cage for his workforce. His town, Pullman, Illinois, wasn't just a place to live. It was a manifestation of his absolute power, a testament to a mindset that harkened back to a bygone era of feudal lords and serfs. Imagine, if you will, a medieval lord, not bound by the whims of a king, but answerable only to his own ambition. This was Pullman's reality. He dictated every aspect of his workers' lives, from where they lived and shopped to the very price of their rent and groceries. He controlled the flow of information, the opportunities for advancement, even the moral compass of his little kingdom. His workers weren't simply employees. They were tenants, consumers, and ultimately, subjects in his self-proclaimed utopia. Think of the medieval manor, with its lord presiding over a carefully managed estate. Pullman's town wasn't dissimilar. He built attractive, standardized housing, but These weren't gifts of generosity. They were carefully calculated tools of control. Neat rows of identical brick houses, all owned by the company, ensured that his workforce remained within his grasp, easily monitored, and utterly dependent. The company store, a hallmark of medieval manorialism, was also present. This wasn't just a place to buy groceries. It was a system designed to keep workers perpetually in debt, trapping them in a cycle of dependence that mirrored the serf's obligation to his lord. Every aspect of their lives was carefully orchestrated to ensure their productivity and loyalty, leaving little room for independent thought or action. Pullman's vision wasn't merely about profit. It was about absolute control, a medieval mindset cloaked in the guise of modern progress. He believed in a hierarchical structure where the workers, like serfs, were expected to be grateful for the privileges bestowed upon them. He saw himself not as an employer, but as a benevolent and supremely powerful patriarch. He controlled their spiritual well-being, too, through subtle yet significant influence over the town's social and religious life. This wasn't merely efficient management. It was a meticulously crafted system of control, a social engineering project designed to eliminate dissent and ensure absolute compliance. The workers in their neat little houses were far from free. They were bound to Pullman, not by chains and whips, but by the subtle, insidious chains of economic dependence and social control. And this carefully constructed illusion of a perfect world was about to shatter. The seeds of rebellion were sown not in anger, but in a quiet, desperate hope for a life beyond Pullman's rigid control. And that hope, my friends, was about to ignite a fire that would engulf the perfect town and send shockwaves through the nation. Luxury unleashes, the illusion of utopia crumbles. Let's rewind. Picture this: Pullman, Illinois, 1893, not the gritty industrial sprawl you might imagine, but a meticulously planned town, a carefully crafted vision of utopian living. Brick streets, manicured lawns, elegant company-owned housing, a veritable paradise, or so it seemed. George Pullman, the mastermind behind this gilded cage, envisioned a community where his workers lived lives of unparalleled comfort, provided for by the benevolent hand of their employer. A paternalistic system, some might call it. Others, a cleverly disguised prison. The historian in me sees parallels here, faint echoes of medieval manorialism, where serfs were bound to the land and their lord, their lives dictated by the whims of their superior. Pullman's workers weren't literally serfs, of course, but their freedom was severely curtailed. They lived in company-owned housing, shopped in company stores, and even worshipped in company-sponsored churches. Every aspect of their lives was intertwined with the Pullman Palace Car Company, the very entity that employed them. George Pullman, the feudal lord of this industrial age, held the keys to their prosperity and their misery. Think of the medieval manor house, a symbol of power and control. Pullman's town mirrored that, albeit in a more modern brick-and-mortar guise. The elegant architecture, designed to impress visitors and instill a sense of order and stability in the workers, belied the precarious nature of their existence. The beautifully landscaped parks and meticulously kept streets concealed the growing discontent brewing beneath the surface. It was a facade, a carefully constructed illusion of harmony, masking the cracks in the foundation. The irony, of course, is palpable. Pullman's workers, the very architects of his vast wealth, were living lives of relative comfort, but only relative. They were treated well, relatively speaking. They had access to amenities not available to workers in other industrial towns. But this relative comfort came at a price: absolute dependence on Pullman's good graces. And those graces, it turned out, were as fickle as the weather. Pullman's benevolence was a carefully calculated strategy designed to ensure a compliant workforce. He provided, but he also controlled. He gave, but he also took. The illusion began to shatter with the economic downturn of 1893. Pullman, facing financial pressures, responded in a manner consistent with the medieval lord's prerogative. He slashed wages by 25%, but kept rents in his company-owned housing unchanged. This was the equivalent of a medieval lord raising taxes on his serfs while simultaneously reducing their harvest yields. The workers, already teetering on the edge, were pushed into a desperate situation. Their carefully constructed lives, their utopia, was crumbling before their eyes. The carefully cultivated image of the benevolent employer shattered, revealing the cold, hard reality of a system built on exploitation. The seeds of rebellion, sown in the fertile ground of desperation, were about to sprout. The air in Pullman, Illinois, hung thick with a simmering resentment, a pressure cooker ready to explode. For months, the whispers had grown louder, the discontent palpable. George Pullman, the benevolent king of his meticulously crafted town, had dealt a blow that felt like a betrayal. A 25% wage cut, yet the rent for his company-owned housing remained unchanged. This wasn't just a financial hardship. It was a violation of the unspoken contract, the social compact that bound this supposedly utopian community. Pullman's workers, the very cogs in his gilded machine, felt the gears grinding to a halt, their trust replaced by bitter anger. They were not serfs bound to the land, not medieval peasants beholden to a lord, but skilled laborers, men and women who had built this town with their own hands. And they were being treated as less than human. This wasn't the benevolent paternalism Pullman had cultivated. His carefully crafted image of a caring employer, a provider of not just jobs but a wholesome life, was crumbling faster than a medieval castle under siege. The town, once a symbol of his progressive vision, now felt like a gilded cage, its beauty masking a brutal reality. The meticulously manicured lawns, the elegant architecture, all of it served as a stark contrast to the growing poverty and frustration within the workers' homes. The meticulously planned gardens were mirroring the tightly controlled lives of the people. The American Railway Union, led by the charismatic Eugene V. Debs, saw their opportunity. Debs, a man who understood the power of solidarity and the simmering rage of the working class, had been watching Pullman's empire with a growing sense of unease. He saw the parallels between Pullman's control and the feudal systems of the past, a powerful lord, controlling every aspect of his serfs' lives, from their housing and wages to their social interactions. The difference here was the absence of land ownership. The workers were not tied to the soil but to Pullman's iron fist. The strike began not as a riotous outburst, but as a quiet refusal. The men, many of them skilled craftsmen, simply laid down their tools. It was a calculated act, a demonstration of their collective power. This wasn't the spontaneous fury of a medieval peasant revolt. It was a strategic maneuver, a meticulously planned campaign against an autocratic ruler. But the quiet defiance was quickly met with a brutal response. Pullman, accustomed to absolute control, refused to negotiate. He saw the strike not as a legitimate grievance, but as a rebellion against his authority, a challenge to his carefully constructed utopia. His response was swift, ruthless, and reminiscent of medieval sieges. This wasn't just a labor dispute. It was a clash of ideologies, a battle between the power of capital and the collective strength of the working class. It was a war between a man who believed he could create a perfect society through absolute control and the people, who refused to be mere cogs in his machine. The echoes of medieval serfdom resonated in the streets of Pullman as workers fought not just for better wages, but for the basic human right to dignity and self-determination. The strike quickly spread, paralyzing the nation's railway system. The impact was far-reaching, far exceeding the confines of Pullman's model town. The strike wasn't just about Pullman's workers. It was a symbol of the burgeoning labor movement, a testament to the growing awareness of the exploitation inherent in the industrial system. The struggle for fair wages and working conditions was no longer a local issue. It had become a national one, a battle that would shape the future of labor relations in America. So, the Pullman strike ended, the violence subsided. The workers, bruised and battered, scattered. But the echoes of Pullman, the chilling resonance of that meticulously controlled utopia gone wrong, continued to reverberate through history. It's a story not just about a single strike, but about a recurring theme, a dark undercurrent that flows from the medieval serfdom of old to the modern corporate towns of today. Let's step back for a moment to the feudal system of the European Middle Ages. Think about the serfs, bound to the land, their lives dictated by the whims of their lord. They toiled endlessly, their labor enriching the landowner, while they themselves often lived lives of grinding poverty and brutal hardship. Their movements were restricted, their freedoms curtailed, their lives essentially owned by another. Sound familiar? The Pullman workers, though ostensibly free, faced a strikingly similar reality. George Pullman, the benevolent dictator of his self-contained town, held sway over every aspect of their lives. He controlled their housing, their access to essential services, even the price of groceries. He dictated their working conditions and, crucially, their wages. His power mirrored that of a medieval lord, his company town a microcosm of a feudal fiefdom. The illusion of choice, the carefully constructed facade of a model community, masked a harsh reality. The difference, of course, lies in the nature of the power. The medieval lord's authority stemmed from tradition, from inherited rights and the perceived divine order. Pullman's power derived from capital, from his control over the means of production and the livelihood of his workers. But the effect was the same, a system that stifled dissent, suppressed individual agency, and ultimately led to widespread discontent. The Pullman strike, then, wasn't just a labor dispute. It was a rebellion against a system that echoed the oppressive structures of centuries past. It was a fight for autonomy, a yearning for freedom from the suffocating grip of absolute corporate control. The parallels with medieval peasant revolts are striking, not just in their shared desperation, but also in the brutal methods used to suppress them. The violence employed to quell the Pullman strike, the deployment of federal troops, the harsh imprisonment of strikers, these actions mirrored the violent suppression of medieval peasant uprisings. The state, in both cases, sided with the powerful, defending the established order against those who dared to challenge it. The legacy of Pullman is not simply a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked corporate power. It's a reminder of the enduring human need for autonomy, for a life free from the oppressive grip of those who would control every aspect of our existence. The echoes of Pullman continue to resonate in the modern world, in the company towns, the gated communities, the corporate campuses that still exist today. They remind us that the fight for fairness, for workers' rights, is a constant struggle, a fight against the enduring temptation to recreate, in new guises, the ancient systems of oppression. The struggle for freedom, like the flow of history itself, is a continuous river. And the question remains, how many more Pullman towns will we allow to be built before we learn the lesson? How many more benevolent dictators will we tolerate before we demand true equality and freedom? The answer, perhaps, lies in our willingness to confront the echoes of the past and build a future where the lessons of Pullman are truly learned. So, there you have it, the story of Pullman, a meticulously crafted utopia that devolved into a brutal battleground. George Pullman, the self-proclaimed benevolent king of his company town, believed he could control every aspect of his workers' lives, mirroring the feudal lords of medieval times who dictated the lives of their serfs. He built a gilded cage, complete with beautiful architecture and amenities, yet within those walls, he held a tight grip on wages, housing, and even the social fabric of the community. His actions, a jarring echo of medieval abuses of power, ultimately led to a bloody conflict that exposed the inherent flaw in his utopian vision, the suppression of human dignity and autonomy. The Pullman strike wasn't just a labor dispute. It was a rebellion against a system that treated its workers as cogs in a machine, a mirror to the serfdom of a bygone era. The echoes of Pullman resonate even today. From the sprawling tech campuses of Silicon Valley to the planned communities of modern times, we see similar attempts to create controlled environments, often with promises of a better life. But history reminds us that genuine progress requires more than physical comfort and curated communities. It demands respect for individual rights, fair treatment, and a recognition that workers are not mere resources to be exploited, but human beings with agency and aspirations. The violence of the Pullman strike stands as a stark warning. A perfect corporate town, devoid of true freedom, is not a utopia, but a powder keg waiting to explode. What do you think? Could a truly perfect company town ever exist without sacrificing fundamental human rights? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Grim Histories for more chilling tales from the past.